Thank you, Michael. And I want to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on a land that was a meeting place for a range of Aboriginal tribes from across New South Wales who came here not just for the fishing in the river and the seeds and the birds and the kangaroos, but also as a place of sharing learning. And so it's always been in this valley that there has been a culture of learning. And as Wayne said, that culture of learning goes back a very long way, even in white society, 100 years to the Mechanics Institute. I'm going to tell you a story which picks up on what both Michael and Wayne have said, but this story has a number of people who you'd have to call villains, and most of those are politicians. And I'm going to talk about them first and what they did to TAFE. But before I do, I want you to know that there are some real heroes in this story. There are 12,000 full-time equivalent TAFE teachers in New South Wales, significantly fewer than there were 4 years ago when the O'Farrell-Baird government came to power in New South Wales. But they are the real heroes because they have kept a world-class TAFE system operating with fewer teachers, with fewer resources, with fewer opportunities, with a lot of their support and expertise stripped out, but it still operates. And no matter how grim it looks, what I've observed, and Michael referred to a committee, I'm a member, a parliamentary committee inquiring into TAFE. I'm actually a member of that committee, and I in fact moved the motion to establish that committee, as did two other people. It was a race to get it up. The reality was that committee has seen some really wonderful things happening in TAFE. Appalling things being done to TAFE, wonderful things being done by TAFE. Those villains are politicians, and those villains are politicians of both political persuasions, both Labor and Coalition. The standout villain, the man who wears the darkest of the cloaks, is a guy called John Dawkins. John Dawkins was and those of us who were in universities, working in universities in the 1980s, shudder when we hear the name of this man, but even more so is what he did to TAFE. John Dawkins was first Education Minister under Hawke and Keating and then Treasurer, and he came up with the great idea that we should open up public funding of TAFE to private providers. In the 30 years since Dawkins held that position, politicians, Coalition and Labor, state and federal, have pushed ahead with that agenda, and the ultimate expression of that in New South Wales is Smart and Skilled. At the same time that was happening in politics, which John Dawkins left, he created for himself a second career. And that career, which ended a year ago, I'm pleased to say, ended up with him being the executive chairman on $1 million a year of the largest private training operation in Australia, Vocation. He was also simultaneously the chair of a thing called the Skills Council, where in fact he was responsible for setting the skills standards for all of Australia. And it took him a while to realise that he actually operated not just with 2 conflicts of interest, but with 3 conflicts of interest. That's what John Dawkins did. But that story, let me fast forward from the mid-1980s to 2012, July 2012, where the mostly Conservative premiers and the then Labor Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, signed the National Partnership Agreement on Skills Reform. Can I say, is anybody else in the room who, when they hear the word reform, instantly shudder? Well, this is one you should have shuddered at. What it did was it committed the states to taking money from TAFE and putting it into a contestable market. In New South Wales, the enthusiastic implementation of that partnership agreement, which started on the 1st of January 2015, will in this financial year take $750 million out of TAFE, that's a third of its budget, and put it into a competitive market where TAFE has to compete against low-cost, low-quality private providers. Now, before somebody gets up and says, "Oh, John Kay, there you go again, you've taken all the private providers and you've said they're low quality, prove it." All right, I'll prove it. In the last 14 months in the state of Victoria, there have been 3,500 Certificates 3 in childcare, disability care and aged care that have been cancelled. Cancelled because these individuals with their Certificate 3s, the trade qualification for working in the care industry, turned up to their employers and they were said, well, could you go and do something with that kid or that person with disability or that person with that aged person? And they looked blankly and said, what? These people knew nothing. They had no idea. Eventually, their qualifications were cancelled. The government got their money back, the government contribution. The fees disappeared forever. So those students paid their fees, spent 6 months of their life getting a non-qualification. It's not just a financial cost. It's not just a blow to their self-esteem. It is the damage that is being done to the quality and the authority of a qualification in Australia. Let me be absolutely clear about those 3,500 qualifications. Not one of them came from a TAFE college. They all came from private providers. I have an example of a beauty college in Sydney that has run every single rort that's been made available to it in the competitive market continuously, including recruiting people into a diploma in beauty therapy rather than a Certificate 3 in beauty therapy, so that they end up graduating with a $15,000 debt and no qualifications that can get them to work as a hairdresser, and worse still, no skills and no knowledge. At the same time, if that person had gone to TAFE, they would have, in fact, because of prior to Smart and Skilled, prior to the 2015 changes, they would have got that qualification for about $500 on a fee concession, and they would have been able to work as a hairdresser. The reality is that there are some private providers who probably do a good job, but there are a lot, particularly the for-profit private providers, who have moved in and who are leeching money. In New South Wales, we stand to lose $250 million out of our vocational education training budget into the profits of private providers. They take about a third of public funding when they're given it, they put it straight into profits. So why are we here? Why are we in a situation where TAFE has lost 2,800 employees, full-time employees? We don't know about the number of casual employees. Permanent employees have gone. We don't know about the number of casuals, but what I'm hearing is it's far greater than that. Why are there 83,000 fewer students in TAFE now than there were 4 years ago? Why is it that outreach, that critical function of TAFE, to reach out into the community and find women, people from non-English speaking backgrounds who are out of the workforce and bring them into training, get them into the workforce, has gone? Why is it that teacher consultants disability, those remarkable human beings who adjust courses for students who come with disability, why have so many of them lost their positions? Why is there not enough money for note takers and sign language interpreters? And I acknowledge we have a sign language interpreter in the room today, and that's terrific. Why is it that they have gone? What was the ideology that allowed this to happen? Well, it was based on three things, three assertions, all three of which were wrong. The first assertion was that there was not enough flexibility in TAFE. TAFE was not responding to the market, and the only way to make it responsive was to open it up to competition. So I've been with this committee that Michael referred to. I've been travelling around New South Wales, and part of the evidence that we've been receiving has been from employers. I've asked every single employer, is TAFE a responsive organisation to your needs? And every single one of them has said yes. People who run meatworks in Lismore, through to people who have a trucking company in Nowra, through to the peak body for electricians, the peak body for rural industries, all of them have said the same thing. The second question I've asked is, so did TAFE become more flexible on the 1st of January 2015, the date when it was opened up comprehensively to competition? And every single one of them has said no. In fact, it's been harder for us to get out of TAFE the things that we were able to get before. I've spoken to students who have been through TAFE. A young Aboriginal bloke in the Tweed, whose story was life was headed to rack and ruin. He'd had some significant, to use the euphemism, engagements with the criminal justice system. But he was found by a TAFE outreach worker who took him in and gave him a Certificate 2, or got him through a Certificate 2 with a lot of adjustment and help from TAFE counsellors and TAFE teachers, a Certificate 3 and an apprenticeship, a Certificate 4 in business studies, and this guy now runs his own electricians company in the Tweed and employs 6 people, has 3 children, a partner, pays an awful lot of tax, or so he tells me, and is a responsible citizen. I asked him, was TAFE responsive to your needs? Stupid question given his life story, but I had to ask it. He said he could not have imagined any organisation with people who were more prepared to bend the rules, to bend the institution, to bend the way they delivered a course, to get him in, to get him to where he is today. We had evidence from a deaf bloke in Lismore, whose teacher consultant's disability got him through 3 courses, the last of which got him ready to go to university, and he went off to university and he is now a teacher. He went through a path of being very interested in deaf rugby and was one of the movers and shakers in deaf rugby. He's now a sports teacher in a school. These are the flexibilities of TAFE. The second argument that was put forward is the people of New South Wales, the people of Australia, spend a lot of money on TAFE. They deserve to know that they're getting good value for money. And the only way to do that is to see if somebody else can do it cheaper. Can I say, if education were tomatoes, I might possibly have some sympathy for the idea that competition is a way of getting best value for money. Might possibly be true. But education is not tomatoes. Education is not a commodity. Education is a social good. Education is not a good that you can try over and over again. You go through it once. There are so many reasons why competition will never produce high quality value for education. What competition has produced is a race to the bottom. The informant that Michael referred to was reading directly from a document which was TAFE New South Wales' final offer to TAFE teachers in the enterprise bargaining process. And one of the things it contained in it was an argument as to why this document, which contained a number of cuts to TAFE teachers' conditions, as outlined by Michael, but also contained the introduction of a sub-professional teacher called a trainer, a person who didn't have expertise or expert qualifications in what they were teaching, and who didn't have a quality education qualification. Why were these things necessary? Because, argues this document, well, in Victoria, when the competitive market was introduced, TAFE was slashed to 27% of delivery. It lost 73% of the market to private providers, which happens to be true, which is unusual for this document because most of it isn't. It said the competitive market being introduced means that TAFE has to respond. TAFE has to become a responsive, market-focused organisation. The only problem with this argument, of course, is that the market wasn't introduced by TAFE. The market wasn't somehow or other handed down to us by the Almighty in a set of tablets. The market was created by the same government that is now pushing through the idea that TAFE has to drop its standards to the same level as the private providers. It is a race to the bottom in quality. It's a race to the bottom in hours delivery. Michael made reference to occupational health and safety. Our committee went to Belmont a TAFE on the Central Coast, just south of Newcastle, which has a great record of teaching in the electrical trades, Certificate 3 for apprentices in the electrical trades. Terrific organisation. They've had to cut their hours from 8 hours delivery to 7 hours delivery. They've had to cut their duration of their course from effectively equivalent of 2 years to 1.5 years. They have had to increase their class sizes from 1 person per workstation to 2 people per workstation. They're not only worried about what happens when these apprentices go out into the real world and are wiring up your house or wiring up your electricity system, they're worried about what's going to happen in their own laboratories. In the Illawarra, the NECA, the National Electricity, I can't remember what it stands for, but it's one of the bodies that looks that employs electricians, employs apprentices, said they would not employ any more apprentices unless the Illawarra Institute reinstated the number of hours and the course duration and reduced class sizes. But why is that happening? Not because TAFE is incompetent, but because we are in a race to the bottom against private providers. The third reason that was asked was that somehow or other private providers would be able to offer things that TAFE could not offer. It's a great story. The only problem with it is that everywhere I've been across New South Wales, I said, what are these things that TAFE couldn't provide? And whenever somebody tells me what they are, I go back to a TAFE teacher, I get on the phone to the union or to a TAFE college, and I find a place where they do provide it. What has happened to TAFE has been malicious policy, not some desire to modernise TAFE, not some reality of a change in environment that came from anywhere other than government policy. It was malicious, and I want to say this. It's the one thing I'm going to say this evening for which I don't have evidence, but I accuse every politician of any political stripe who pushed for the marketisation of education, the privatisation of TAFE, the commodification of post-secondary education of three things. Firstly, a profound disrespect for working class Australians, a belief that they don't deserve high quality education. The second thing I accuse them of is not just a blind-like faith in the market, but an ideological commitment to markets which blinded them to the reality of what would happen to education for people with special needs, to libraries, to people who come to TAFE with diverse learning needs. But the third thing I accuse them of is that they did this deliberately. And why did they do that? Because if you don't believe in the public sector, if you don't believe in collective action for the common good, then inevitably what you have to do is destroy all examples of where it works. And let me tell you, TAFE is a world-class institution. There are people still coming to New South Wales to look at what TAFE has done, where it came from and whether they can reproduce that in America. Barack Obama, a man who in education policy is deeply flawed, is trying to turn community colleges into TAFE. He's trying to make them free. While we are pushing up fees such that we're driving people out of TAFE, Barack Obama is going in the other direction to create a free public system of community colleges. These people cannot stand the idea that a public sector vocational education institution is so profoundly successful that it delivers high quality education, it delivers second chance education, it delivers opportunity for people who wouldn't otherwise have it, and it delivers social cohesion, and critically, it delivers an educated workforce, a workforce that doesn't just know how to do something but knows why it's doing it and can think about other ways of doing things. They can't stand that idea because it's being done by a public sector institution, and their ideology says that public is always and inherently inferior to the private sector. I've stood outside Armidale TAFE College with a teacher in tears. In tears not because of what happened to her, which was appalling. In tears not because her salary has been held at standstill, her conditions are being cut, Her class sizes have grown. The workload has become unbelievable, but in tears because she was unable to enrol students. She had a TAFE college. That boy, get out of the class now. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'm not teaching anymore. Listen, mate, we're a rough lot. That teacher was in tears because a computer software for enrolment did not allow her to enrol students. She had students who would benefit and who were desperate to get an education. She had a TAFE college that had places, and a barrier had been erected by a software that was not only incompetently designed but was enforced onto TAFE by ministers and bureaucrats who wanted to destroy TAFE. There is a malicious hand at work here that wants to see a future without TAFE. Well, I tell you this, and I pay tribute to state Labor in New South Wales, who have shucked off their past and have stood with us and stood with the Teachers Federation, the Australian Education Union, the TAFE Community Alliance, and increasing numbers of organisations in civil society, and said, it's over. We will not tolerate a market that is so maliciously designed that it will destroy TAFE. We will not let TAFE in New South Wales go down the same path it did in Victoria, where it has fallen to 27% of market. We will not let it go the same way it was pushed in Queensland by that horrible little twit, Campbell Newman, who stripped TAFE of its buildings. Not content with taking money away from TAFE, he took public sector buildings away from TAFE and rented them out to the private sector. So bad that students walking in there saw the TAFE logo, thought they were getting TAFE quality education, and got Shonky Brothers Shonky Brothers training from fly-by-night operators whose previous fixed address was a shipping container on the back of a truck. And I kid you not, there is a provider in northern New South Wales, Norco, who started out their training in a shipping container on the back of a truck, where that's where they did when it was said, look, this doesn't comply with disability access, they got a forklift in to lift people in with. That's the quality of treatment of students that Campbell Newman was going to allow to happen inside TAFE colleges. That will not happen here in New South Wales. Our inquiry has been transformative for some members of Parliament. They have actually spoken to TAFE students and to TAFE teachers. 150 furious TAFE students and teachers at Belmont hijacked our morning tea. There was a little bit of help in their hijacking, I have to admit. Hijacked our morning tea, our polite and genteel morning tea, and let us know what this meant to them in their lives, what it would mean to them if Belmont TAFE College, which is one of the 23 TAFE colleges that's up for sale, or part of it's up for sale, disappears. As you know about here in Goulburn very well, with one of your campuses closed and slated for sale. I believe that we are at a turning point, a tipping point. A tipping point, first of all, in community attitudes. Last Monday, a week ago, we ran our Stand Up for Hands Off TAFE Day of Action. We were inundated. I actually broke my photocopier making up enough leaflets for people to hand out. We were inundated. It wasn't actually my photocopy. It actually belongs to Mike Baird, so he'll have to fix it for me. We were inundated with people who wanted to stand up for TAFE, people who wanted to say to the government, hands off TAFE. I stand on street corners every opportunity I have and hand out the leaflet. There's stacks of them up the back there if you want them too. And engage people in conversations about the idea of privatisation of TAFE and how crazy that would be. The message is getting through. The New South Wales government has already retreated from some of the most ridiculous aspects of their smart and skilled training market. But there is more to be done here. That inquiry report will come out on the 15th of December. I'm quietly confident that we can get Labor and the chairman, a Christian Democrat by the name of Paul Green, to agree with us that the smart and skilled market comes to an end. that TAFE has the $750 million restored to it as secure budget, so TAFE managers can plan to reinstate outreach, teacher consultants disability, library services, the full range of educational services for people who come to TAFE with almost no literacy or numeracy or study skills or language skills. That we can reinstate TAFE. I think that we have about 2 years to do this. If I'm back here in 2 years, it'll be a lament for TAFE. It will have gone too far to restore. But it is savable now, and never has there been a better opportunity. The lead up to a federal election, that national partnership expires on the 30th of June 2017. Whoever is the next government in Australia will rewrite the national partnership. That national partnership has to end the competition policy, the absurd application of markets to education. Right now, state Labor is on board with us, at least with limiting the market. Federal Labor is still on a journey. I urge those of you who are in the Labor Party to push federal Labor to the good position that state Labor's got to. I urge all of us to remember that state and federal, all parties, have blood on their hands when it comes to TAFE. But, you know, I believe in redemption. I believe the New South Wales Labor Party's redeemed itself. The Federal Labor Party is questioning whether it should. The Liberal Party, I think, might be beyond redemption. I don't know. But we need a new deal for TAFE. We need a new deal for TAFE that not only ends the competition policy, but crucially reinstates the funding, brings down the fees, reinstates the positions that have been lost, and once again has those TAFE teachers doing what they do, doing that magic, that transformational magic that only dedicated public sector professionals who are outside of a market, outside of a business, but in a public sector institution can do, and that is create citizens who respect themselves, who respect their society, and who respect their future. Thank you so much for listening. Could you pour me some water, please?